Welcome to Palm Sunday, where we talk about and celebrate the triumphal entry. I'd like to invite you to open your Bibles to the book of Luke. We're going to be taking a unique turn in the middle of this sermon. And rather than warn you what it's about, you just have to hang in here and don't leave halfway through, okay? Because, no, I'm not going to tell you because I'll get started. I'm so excited about the second half of this. Luke chapter 19, verse 28 is where we have the triumphal entry Palm Sunday event. I just want to read it to you, and then we're going to make some observations, look at a few things, and then we'll get into some really exciting things. Verse 28, Luke chapter 19 says this: After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethphage and Bethany, at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' say, 'The Lord needs it.'" They replied, so those who sent ahead went and found it just as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they replied, "Well, the Lord needs it." There's a lot happens in that conversation between verse 34 and 35 that I can't wait to hear it. But I don't think it went badly. I think it was like, really? He does? Okay, there's something happened there. But said the Lord needs it, so they brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks on the colt, and put Jesus on it. As he went along, people spread their cloaks on the road. When he came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in a loud voice for all the miracles they had seen. Why were they praising him? Because he was Messiah, King, Savior? Because of all the miracles they'd seen. Verse 38, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." Did they recognize him as king in some way here? What were they saying? Blessed is the King. They did. And so they're celebrating the coming of their king with palm branches and throwing their cloaks down, and it was quite the celebration. I have a hard time celebrating it with them the way they did. In fact, when I would stand in the marketplace during the living drive-through, it was easy to dance around and celebrate, but I felt like a hypocrite because I knew that the celebration that they were experiencing was going to make Jesus weep. And if we're going to look at it in a minute, if Jesus wept over their celebration, they were missing something. There was something, they were having fun, it was exciting, there was an element of truth to what they had. But they were missing the depth of what was there, and Jesus wept over their missing of the depth of what was there. Just like Larry was saying, I wonder how many people are playing church and they get discouraged, but I'll tell you what, you never get discouraged following Jesus Christ. When you are discouraged following Jesus Christ, it's because you're taking your eyes off of him. And so there's just something that when I see that and I'm dancing, I'm like, I'm trying to portray what they were doing, but I know better. And as Jesus rode that colt through them and he saw the celebration, he saw them dancing and singing for him, he knew better. He knew what was really going on and what was going to happen that very week. So I find it hard to celebrate because I see the deception that they were in. Look at verse 39 to show you this deception. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." The religious leaders said, "Hey, Mr. Carpenter Jesus of Nazareth, stop these people from calling you king." Why would they want Jesus to stop the disciples from calling him king? Because they didn't recognize that he was the king. So, were they there? Yep. But they did not understand what was right in front of their eyes. Keep reading, verse 40. "I tell you," he replied, "if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he, Jesus, wept over it. I thought they were coming together to announce him and to accept him and calling him king. Why would he weep? Here's why. Verse 42, "And said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace. But now it's hidden from your eyes." He said, it was available. I'm here as something that would truly bring you peace. What did they think was there? They thought a king was there to bring them peace. What peace? Well, the overbearing Roman government over top of them. The lack of food in times, because he was able to create food and take fish and loaves of bread and make it enough for thousands of people. Who wouldn't want a king like that? That's a far cry than just printing more money. Let's see him build another Fort Knox and put real gold in it. Then I'd be impressed. What Jesus was doing were these miracles, healing the sick, and they said, who wouldn't want a king who will do that for all of his subjects? Did they believe in a king coming? Could Jesus do all those things? Yes. Is he offering a kingdom that will do those things? Just not yet. Because we want that kind of peace, but God has a deeper peace that must come first. And that peace is not being at war with the holy and righteous one, but to be at peace with him. If you have peace with the Son, you have peace with the Father. If you have peace with the Father, I don't care about any other kind of peace. It doesn't matter. Now, if he wants to reward me by giving me peace on earth and with sicknesses and other miracles, great. He can do that, and it will only be the icing on top of a very important cake. It is not the cake itself. So many people worshiping what God would do for them rather than worshiping the God who does them. And that was their problem. Look at verse 43. To make it clear, the days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. Now let me just pause for a minute. Does that sound like uplifting news? What were they doing? Celebrating, singing. Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Behold our King. And they're celebrating. Have you ever been where people are really happy and having a good time, and you drop some kind of bad news, and they're like, gee, thanks for being a wet blanket? When I prepared this, I almost felt that way. Because I don't want to go from the joyous occasion that we could be having and say, we're not supposed to be celebrating, they're just doing the wrong thing, and I'm not trying to bring you down, okay? In fact, what Jesus is saying is, if you understood what I was really trying to do and what I'm really trying to tell you, you'd have been a whole lot more excited than you were dancing around right now. I've got really good news for you. And we're going to end with some really good news. Okay? We're going to get there. But we've got to start by understanding, he's saying, look, I know you're all excited, but the stuff that you are lifting up here, this beautiful temple and the worship and the dancing in the streets, listen, it's all going to end. He's telling them in the middle of their celebration, this is going to stop. You're pursuing the wrong thing here. As Larry said, you're pursuing religion rather than the relationship with the king. Let me keep reading in that context. He says in verse 44, they will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. Hey, if you're going to bring them down, bring them way down, right? We were just singing and dancing to you, king, and you're telling me as king, the provider, that what we can look forward to is the enemy's going to come in and defeat us and beat us down and even take our children. I'm not sure I want you as king. Can you sense it? They will not leave one stone on another. Why? You might say, well, it's back here where it says it's now hidden from your eyes. If something is hidden from your eyes, is it your fault you don't see it? This is a very important question. If it's hidden from your eyes, is it your fault you don't see it? I guess it depends on why it's hidden from your eyes. If it's hidden from your eyes because God just didn't want to tell you, that would not be our problem, it would be his. But why was it hidden from their eyes? Look at the last phrase of verse 44. Because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you. I gave you all the prophecy. I gave you all the signs. I lined it up for you to see this is the time. It's coming. I've shown you things. I've exampled the kingdom for you. I've offered the kingdom for you. But you didn't recognize who was coming. You recognized areas of kingship and things that you liked, but you didn't see it. That verse haunts me. No, that verse used to haunt me when I thought, I don't want to be the same where because I didn't recognize the time of God's second coming. Are you hearing me? Do you think that these examples are put in there just to tell us how bad they were or to keep us from making the same mistake? Same story as in Matthew 21. Oh, wait, hold on. I got a little ahead of myself. Let's go to that slide right there. This comes from Daniel. I want to talk about Daniel 9:25 because I said he gave them all these signs, told them what was coming, and they didn't recognize it. Here's what they didn't recognize, their own scriptures. Daniel 9:25. And for those of you that are new to the church in the last 3 to 4 months, will have just barely missed when I talked about this. It's been about 6 months ago. But here's what it says. Know and understand this. And then there's a specific event. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Let me just stop right there for a minute. Why would it need to be rebuilt? Well, Daniel, some of you know the story of Daniel. Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were all exiled. That means they were taken from their country and taken to Babylon when Babylon overran the Israelites. They took them captive and destroyed the temple. All right, so at this point, these are young men when they get to Babylon, but they held on to their faith in God. And because they held on to their faith, God protected them. And they grew up in Babylon, but in worshiping Jehovah. And so God gives Daniel these dreams, and he says, from the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, right there, that's good news for Daniel. Because Daniel's looking, he's living in Babylon, away from his people. His people have been scattered. The city's been torn down. And God tells him, let me tell you about the restoration of Jerusalem and your people. Isn't that good news? It's kind of like death to us now. I miss my mom. But guess what? I know of her restoration and my restoration when we will be together. So I don't have to worry about it. Same thing with Daniel. God told him, I'm going to restore them. I will rebuild Jerusalem. Good news? Yeah. When is that going to happen? Well, from the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, which means it's going to happen, until the anointed one, the ruler, till the Messiah comes, till the anointed king comes, it says there will be 7 sevens. In the King James, it's 7 weeks. A week there not meaning 7 days, but 7 years. And we know this because these have already been prophesied and fulfilled, and we've seen some of these things already happen. It says there will be 7 sevens. That's how many years? 49, and 62 sevens. Put them together, that's 69 sevens. Right? You with me? Okay. From the time the decree goes out to rebuild the streets and the trench, it will be rebuilt with streets and the trench, but in times of trouble. So it's going to be difficult, so it's going to take longer, and that's what happened. The first 7 sevens, the walls were rebuilt. 49 years it took to do that. Okay? Go to the next slide. I want to show you where that fits in. From March 14th, 445 BC, the decree went out to rebuild. The permission went out to rebuild Jerusalem. If you go exactly 7 years ahead of that, you have them rebuilt. Then you have a total, including those 49, 483 years further that brings you to, these are dated calendar events. You can go back and calculate them out based on the Jewish lunar calendar, which, by the way, is not the same number of days per year as us, but I'm not going to get into all that right now. But by the Jewish calendar, it leads you exactly to the 10th of Nisan, April 6th to us, 32 AD, and on that very day was Palm Sunday, Jesus entering Jerusalem. It was prophesied almost 500, well, it was prophesied more than 500 years before, because it was telling Daniel, here's the prophecy, but then you got to wait until the decree to rebuild. And then you've got the 69 sevens. So more than 500 years before, it was prophesied on the day that Jesus would come into Jerusalem riding on a donkey. Should they have seen it? But they didn't recognize the fulfillments of prophecy right under their noses. And because of that, their eyes couldn't see, and the truth was hidden from their eyes because they didn't believe in the prophecies. You follow me? Okay. Where am I at now? I kind of got behind. Matthew. Let's go to Matthew chapter 21. I'm going to have you turn to Matthew 21 because we're not going to read Matthew 21. I just want you to see something. Matthew chapter 21, starting in verse 1, is the same story. I'm not going to read it again because we've already read it. I'm here for a reason. In fact, this story of the triumphal entry is one of the very few stories that are in all 4 Gospels. And each one gives us a little bit of more information about it. So now that you know that Matthew 21 is the story of the triumphal entry, what I'd really like you to do is look at Matthew chapter 20, because it's in the context of preparation for that event. All right, so we're going to look at Matthew 20, knowing he's just about to enter as king, and he's preparing them. And look at verse 17. Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, and on his way he took the 12 aside and said to them, "We're going up to Jerusalem, And the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, that's the Romans, to be mocked and flogged and crucified. And on the third day, he'll be raised to life. Now, when you read that, what do you know he's talking about? His death on the cross, his resurrection, and then 40 days later, his ascension into heaven, and then he's going to prepare a place for us so that someday we can all be there together. We can't help but not see it, because that's what Jesus was actually talking about. Here's the thing. Did the disciples see it that way when Jesus said it? No, they didn't get that yet. And what I want you to try to do for a moment is to get into their heads to see what they were thinking when Jesus said this. It might be a little hard, but I think we can do it. Look at verse 20, the next verse. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons, that's James and John, two of the disciples, came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down asked a favor of him. What is it you want, he asked. She said, grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other on your left in your kingdom. Now, I'll bet most of us, when we read that, pictured them saying, in the kingdom of heaven, I want my kids to be. It's not what she's saying. He's about to go through something. It sounds really bad. Mocking, flogging, crucifixion, and rising. But then he's going to be our king. His kingdom's really close. He's about to be king. And I want my kids to be on his left or right. In fact, Jesus, I'm not pushy. You can choose which one of my kids is on your right and which one of my kids is on your left. I'm giving you a choice. You see what she's thinking? She's thinking, this whole stuff's coming to a head. It's about to happen. I'm about to have my kingdom, the one we've all been waiting for. That's why the disciples on the road to Emmaus after his death, the day he died, said, we thought he was the one to redeem Israel. We thought he was the Messiah, but we were expecting something different than what we're getting. Mother of James and John were expecting the same thing everybody else was expecting, an immediate kingdom. In your kingdom, here on earth, against our enemies, I want my kids to be on either side of you. And by the way, she didn't bring her kids, James and John, screaming and dragging their feet. They're like, come on, Mom, you do it. And that's why the disciples, the other 10, got mad, is they're all seeing it the same way. They didn't understand what was really taking place, but they were aware that something very special was about to happen. Have you ever felt that way? If you have been in this church and listening over the last 6 months, you should feel like, I don't know exactly what's about to happen, but I feel like something could happen. I believe there is much more about Jesus' second coming that we won't understand until it's completed. You've heard me say that before. But I do understand something very special about, I believe something very special is about to happen. The signs are all there, just as they were for his first coming. And Luke 19:44, as I've read already, they did not recognize the time of his coming. I recognize his coming could be right soon. I also recognize he's very patient and can wait as long as he wants. I also recognize that God could get us right to the point where it looks like he could do it just to show us I could do this whenever I want and then back out and give us more time to reach other people. Listen, this is a non-profit church. I'm not a prophet. Oh, come on. Hang in there with me. I'm just preaching God's word. And it says, look for these signs. And I'm telling you, the signs are there. Look, let's go back to Luke 22 now. Back to the Luke. We've been in Luke 19. Now I want to go a little bit further and look at the same story from Luke's perspective. And this is going to start to transition into the last quarter of our sermon that I'm really excited to get to. I want to, in order to start to transition, why did Jesus go to Jerusalem? I want to ask you that question. Why did he go to Jerusalem? Well, you could say, well, the fulfillment of prophecy, to ride the colt. All that is true. But in a very practical sense, why did everybody go to Jerusalem at that time and he was part of them? What were they preparing for? The Passover. They're going to prepare for the Passover. So look at verse 7. Verse 7 of chapter 22 of Luke. Luke 22:7. Then came the day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. Do you realize there was a certain day that the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed? Days and times are important for the sacrifices. You couldn't just do it whenever you wanted. It was set by calendars, and they've got their days of feast, and it's very organized from the Old Testament. Verse 8, Jesus sent Peter and John saying, go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover. Where do you want us to prepare for it? They asked. And then for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the whole story, but he tells them where to go and make preparations. And it's not only preparations that day to have the feast, but they come a whole week early because you remember Jesus went to the temple, and what did he do with the money changers' tables? Flip them over. All right, well, why were they there? Well, because people traveling would come, and they had certain sacrifices they needed to perform before they could do the Passover. They had to be ceremonially clean. They're just like you prepare for that, because if you touch a dead body, or if a dead body in your tent has a jar open, the stuff in it is now unclean. And there's all kinds of sacrifices in order to get clean and have your things clean. And you got to be careful not to touch something that isn't clean. And you got all this stuff in preparation for the Passover. Aren't you glad we don't have to do that? I'm glad I just got on my knees and confessed my sin before the Lord, and the once for all sacrifice forgave me, and now I get to see him in heaven. However, these were things that God demanded that they do in pointing towards the true Messiah. Let me ask you a question. Do they need to do that now? Why not? Because Jesus paid the price. It's already done. There's no reason the Jews should have to do one more sacrifice. Not one. Do they realize that? No, they think they still have to do them because, as we've just read, they missed and didn't recognize the first coming of their Messiah. So to them, they're still under the Old Testament law. And for 2,000 years, they've not had a temple. They've not had a place to do sacrifices. They feel pushed away from their God, and they're wanting to get back to doing that. And this is where things get a little bit exciting. Not last Wednesday, but the Wednesday before, we happened to be in Numbers chapter 19. I want you to turn there for a moment. All the way to the Old Testament. You say, what does Numbers have to do with Easter 2024? I thought we live in the New Testament and don't need the Old Testament. I just want to tell you how the Lord timed this out. Back when we were just coming out of COVID, that's been a few days. I was trying to help the youth get started with a youth group. Kyle was not our youth pastor. I was doing some stuff with the youth and trying to get, I think, Smentowski's. We might have had a few people working with us. And so Brother Kevin got up here, and he was doing the adults on Wednesday night. He started a Bible study in Genesis, and we've been taking our good old time getting through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and now we're up to Numbers. That's been several years taking our good old time. Well, we get to Numbers 19, and I start reading this, and it really helps me understand current events in 2024. Watch this. The first 4 verses of chapter 19. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is a requirement of the law that the Lord has commanded. Tell the Israelites to bring you a red heifer without defect or blemish, and that has never been under a yoke. Give it to Eleazar the priest. It is to be taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. Then Eleazar the priest is to take some of the blood on his fingers and sprinkle it 7 times toward the front of the tent of meeting." What's he supposed to take? A red heifer. Interesting. Look at verse 9. A man who is clean, that means ceremonially clean, shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and put them in a ceremonially clean place outside the camp. They are to be kept by the Israelite community for the use in the water of cleansing. So what do they do with these ashes of the red heifer? Put it in what? Water. And then that water becomes what? Water for cleansing. It is for purification from sin. Now look, we don't have that. What is our purification from sin? Jesus Christ, because he became the final sacrifice. But to build it in so that they would make sense that what his sacrifice would do, he said, I'm putting it right in here for you to observe for a long time. Look at verse 13. If they fail to purify themselves after touching a human corpse, they defiled the Lord's tabernacle. They must be cut off from Israel, because the water of cleansing has not been sprinkled on them. They are unclean. Their uncleanliness remains on them. How serious is this cleansing water? And in order to have it, you got to have what? A red heifer. Look at verse 13. No, I just did verse 13. Look at verse 20. But if those who are unclean do not purify themselves, they must be cut off from the community because they have defiled the sanctuary of the Lord. The water of cleansing has not been sprinkled on them, and they are unclean. This is a lasting ordinance. So let me ask you a question. Without the red heifer, are they going to be able to get unclean? No. Now, we know they can be. They can be unclean by recognizing the Messiah, Jesus Christ. But in their minds, for 2,000 years, they've not been able to be clean. Can you imagine if you believed in Jesus Christ, but you believed it, but for 2,000 years you weren't allowed to even look at or draw a cross? Because you're forbidden. Like, this is what it is to them. It's their religion is founded on being clean and unclean. And for 2,000 years, they've been scattered and unclean. And now, in this generation, they've been brought back together. They've got all the utensils and the materials for a temple, but they can't build it because they can't do it clean. I have a video I want you to watch, and then a few closing remarks, and we'll be done.
You see, on January 14th, 100 days into the war, Hamas spokesman Abu Ubaidah released a statement reiterating the motives for the October 7th attack against the State of Israel. During his speech, he cited the arrival of the Red Heifers into occupied Palestine and described it as a provocation.
نذكر بعدوان بلغ أقصى مداه على مصرانا وأقصانا وبدأ تقسيمه الزماني والمكاني فعلا وأحضرت البقرات الحمر تطبيقا لخرافة دينية مقيتة مصممة للعدوان على مشاعر أمة كاملة.
You see, the red heifer plays a central role in a prophecy of epic magnitude. It isn't just a cow, it's a domino in what many around the world perceive to be the end of times. But what does this all have to do with with cows? Well, according to Jewish theology, the temple cannot be reconstructed until the Jews of Israel are purified. And the process of purification requires the sacrifice of a rare type of cow.
It says that God spoke to Moses and Aaron saying, "This is the ritual law that God has commanded, instruct the children of Israel to bring you a red cow without blemish, in which there is no defect, and on which no yoke has been laid." So it says that we're supposed to take a perfectly red cow with no white hairs or dark hairs at all, and a cow that no yoke has ever been on. So as a result, it's very, very rare to find a baby cow that is completely red.
It's basically the bougiest cow of all time. This kind of red heifer has been incredibly difficult to find. Even with genetic modification and breeding, finding the perfect red heifer domestically in Israel has been near impossible. But in 2022, 5 of these perfect red heifers were discovered on a ranch in Texas. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem spent over $500,000 to airlift these red heifers to Israel, where they were placed on a secretive farm. In April of this year, these heifers will be of age, and the sacrifice can commence. To prepare for this, the Temple Institute and other groups have been making all sorts of preparations. Firstly, the sacrifice must be made by the perfect priest, not only trained in the process of sacrifice, but also with a direct bloodline to the prophet Aaron, the brother of the prophet Moses.
The priests have been chosen through their DNA, would you believe, and family lines to prove to be descendants of rabbis dating back to the very first high priest of Israel, Aaron, who was the brother of Moses. If the ashes of the red heifer become available, that would mean the building of the third Jewish temple cannot be far away in the future, and the present temporal priests who have been trained and are ready to carry out their temple duties only need to wash in the ashes of the red heifer to be completely ready to serve when the temple is built.
The sacrifice must also be made east of the Temple Mount, around the Mount of Olives, where the priests can be within sight of the compound itself. And this land has already been purchased.
According to those working on the project, the ceremony of the red heifer needs to be performed on the Mount of Olives and in a place that would have looked directly into where the temple stood. The land I'm standing on, bought 12 years ago, fits both of those standards.
It's had to be exactly at the front a place that the priest that made this ceremony can see the Holy of the Holy Place.
Rabbi Yitzhak Mamo owns the land here on the Mount of Olives.
And we hope that in a year and a half from today, we can make here in this area the ceremony of the red heifer. That actually will be the first step to the temple.
Mamo says the ceremony needs priests who have not been defiled by touching anything dead.
The Temple Institute actually have 9 pure priests, and they are pure, and they are waiting. So we have the priest, we have the red heifer, we have the land, and we have everything ready. We just need to wait another 1.5 years.
So a year and a half ago, those heifers got shipped over. 2 of the 5 have been disqualified. They grew a blonde or a gray or a dark hair. 3 of them remain. The older they get, the more likely they are to be disqualified. Go to the next slide. I think it's the next slide. Yep. On the March 29th and 30th of this year, that's Friday night to Saturday is the Sabbath for the Jews. That is the Shabbat of the red heifer. Folks, that's this next weekend. How current is that? You like current events? In 2,000 years, no preacher has been able to stand up and say they now have everything they had, could do it next week. But I can tell you that. Now, does that mean the Lord's coming back this week? Nope. He can get right up to the edge and say, just showed you I could, I'm waiting. There's a lot more that's going on. Go to the next slide. I just want to show you this. Those are the Sabbaths that have been planned for a long time. They've got different Sabbaths for different reasons. And it's not that just, oh, this is intriguing. We got the red heifers. Let's have a Sabbath for the red heifer. For years, it's been designated that that's the day of the Sabbath of the red heifer. Do you understand? Things are coming to a head over there. All I want us to be doing is saying, if the Lord came back, He didn't catch us off guard. We were looking, and He came. If we're looking and He doesn't come, I will not be disappointed. I will just keep looking. Hannah mentioned it to me yesterday. She goes, I feel so strange, because we were talking about her house and the linoleum that went down that's pretty cheap, and when she wants to put tile on it, and someday, 4 or 5 years down the road, you know. And she goes, it feels so strange to actually believe we could be out of here within the next few weeks, but make plans for the next decade. Folks, that's the right attitude. That's what I want to be accused of. Now, there were also some signs about, have anybody seen stuff about the eclipses? Yep, all right, I was going to talk about that too, and how do we approach that stuff? I knew I wouldn't have time, so I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to do that this Wednesday. If you want to know about it, I'll do it Wednesday. At this time, I need, what I want to do, we got something special that we're going to be doing right now, and that is, we're going to have a invitation song. They're going to come and do that, but while they do, I need somebody to go tell the kids that you're going to get them. Tell them to come back in. So when they come in, I want parents to try to get your kids and bring them back to your chair, because we're going to do a baptism for one of our children today. But I still want there to be a time of invitation for us, because listen, we need to be ready. And the way to get ready is to recognize that the sacrifice that they're attempting to do has already been fulfilled in Jesus Christ. In Hebrews, he says that this is one sacrifice once for all, so that no other sacrifice would ever have to be done. How does someone prepare for the coming of the Messiah? It's not with red heifers. It's not with a temple. That's actually preparing for the tribulation period, and they don't realize it. What we need to do to get prepared for the second coming is to know Jesus Christ and have Him in our heart. There is no better time than today. If you're not sure of your salvation, I beg you, and I plead with you, start putting off all the things that are tangling up your attention and say, I need to focus on Jesus Christ. He's the side I want to be on when things go down.